All right. So you asked me about the Thai forest tradition, which means something to the West, possibly because they heard it in regard to certain people. That
Mm-hmm.
I've even heard go so far as to say that one monk started the Thai forest tradition. Generally, that's referred to as Achan Mun. Um, and that the reality is um, there's actually three kinds of Watts. But let's leave the city Watts because the city Watts are really nothing but just village Watts. So you have the village Watt, and then you have the forest Watt. And that the tradition is that the village Watt is where mom and dad spend a lot of their time. And so the kid will learn all about the village Watt. He's there, it's in the community. Uncles and family members are at the Watt. They're already family. And so he goes to the Watt, he ordains, and will stay there for a short period of time, which could be from 3 months up to about, uh, a couple of years or so. And then he will go to the forest Watt. And then the forest Watt, he'll stay there in the forest for quite a long time. And then um, there's also a lot of movement around. So the monks will go on what is called tudong, and they'll walk. Nowadays, they do more transportation, and that's especially true in the U.S., where monks actually ride and sometimes drive. A whole group of monks will be in the van together. Um, may or may not have a Thai layman as a driver, but they move around a lot. But they still spend time in both of the places. But the real point is that the forest Watts are there to get away from the village, to give the young monk some seclusion so that he can really get his head together. And then later, many, many years later, perhaps, he'll go back and stay in the village Watts as a service to the community. And so it's an artificial designation when the Western people think about the Thai forest tradition. There is no such thing as a Thai forest tradition. You just have a lot of Watts in the forest,
Right.
and that's a tradition.
Yeah, I guess
It's
when I've heard
tradition.
that term, I think in the West, it's usually like referring to like the idea of like some kind of like practice lineage, like you have the Zen tradition or the Tibetan practices, or there's the Thai forest.
Well, that's actually something that's quite amazing, also. Those things don't exist. There is no such thing as Zen. There is no such thing as Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism. That what you'll have instead is the actual real teachings of the Buddha going in and kind of, let us say, getting a foothold and growing in an already existing, sometimes thousands of years old culture.
Oh yeah,
And there is no such thing as Tibetan Buddhism. What instead exists is Buddhist in Tibet. And that oftentimes, and I saw this back in the 70s, in fact, um, that the Westerners fell in love more with Indian culture than they did into Hinduism.
right.
That it was the Indian culture, just like the Tibetan culture. Now,
Mm.
the Tibetan culture is different than Thai culture, and that it's a part of the base is the old traditions of religion, let us call it animism, because that's what the actual technical definition. There is no such thing as Hinduism. There is animism. That Hinduism is animism, but guess what? Thailand had its own version of animism that still exists. And Tibetan has its own old animism that almost dominates the Buddhism. And possibly the best example of what I'm talking about is a video that we've got that's right. Actually, it's on the home page of the website that we have of the visit that the Dalai Lama went and visited Bhikkhu Buddhadasa back in the 70s. The only reason why he didn't go more often was because in those days it was all a political issue with China. And so China would, let us say, pressurize the Thai government to prevent the Dalai Lama from getting a visa to come into Thailand. Otherwise, he would have been here a whole lot more because he was good friends with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Now, in the United States, we don't have such things. That when I was raised in the South, basically there were three main groups: there were the Methodists, the Presbyterians, and the Baptists. And then there was some weird stuff that was going on also called Pentecostal, Seventh-day Adventist. There were not any Mormons in that area, but Jehovah's Witness. Some of them were called Holy Rollers, but they were marginalized. But the big groups, the Methodist, and I saw this in every town that I lived in, and my dad had a job to where he was moving around quite a bit. And so I saw 7 different towns, all of them having the same structure, to where the tycoons, the money bags, and the top politicians all went to the Methodist Church. All of the service people, like mostly the teachers, this is, there's some looseness in there. It's not hardcore, but police, teachers, those kind of people went to the Presbyterian church, and the blue collar people went to the Baptist church. And basically, never the twain will meet. That not only was the religion, but it was also the social strata. Okay, so we were raised with that mentality, and so Westerners are automatically going to have that division system in their own minds when they look at Buddhism, to where in fact Buddhism is only, it's not the strata of the society that makes the distinction, but rather the location. That in fact there's quite a lot of what you would call Mahayana Buddhism in Thailand. That close to Wat Suan Mok in the town of Chaya rather, there's a World Heritage place, museums, and 1,300-year-old chetties, and they're still digging up statues. So Buddhism was very strong, very heavy here. This was actually part of the Srijaya civilization that was based in Indonesia. And they also, by the way, the part of that society was the Angkor Wat in Cambodia. And that the middle place was here in Thailand around Chaya. So 1,300 years ago, this area was Mahayana. Interesting. And that we actually have several Mahayana statues at Wat Suan Mok. Probably they were dug up rather than newly manufactured. And that, in fact, even at the retreat center on Koh Samui, the center called Deepa Bhawan, where Achan Po and Achan Dhammavitu live, They have there, the main statue is a Mahayana statue, predominantly displayed. But Westerners, they don't see that there's no distinction, that in fact, that's much more of an issue of culture than it is of the actual teachings. That there is actually only one Buddhism, and that Buddhism is all about stop hurting, come out of your suffering.
The practices differ a little bit from culture to culture.
Only because of, let us say, languages change over time. That the language, for instance, that Shakespeare spoke only 300-400 years ago is hardly recognizable. And Beowulf, which was a couple of hundred years before that, is almost impossible for a kid in the 9th grade to read.
Right.
All right. Same place, just different times. So that's what's happened is that Buddhism, what we mostly see, is culture. And we mistake culture for the actual teachings of the Buddha. And partly because of that is that the actual teaching of the Buddha is not complicated, it's simple. The Buddha didn't teach very much. He just kept teaching the same thing over and over again in different contexts with different similes, different metaphors, etc., like that. And it winds up looking very complicated, partly because the monks, over the traditional periods of time, because it's been like 2,500 years, which gives us a number of generations, and every young monk wants to understand the Dhamma, so he'll write something down, and then when he's an old man, he'll go back and review it and fix it up a bit, and then the next 100 years later, it becomes part of the canon. That in fact, the Christian Bible is much more problematic. Why? Because there were scholars who picked and chose their favorite books to be put into the Bible or taken back out again.
Yeah, the Jewish tradition has a lot of those same issues because there's actually like rabbinic commentaries from over the years that have become like a canon unto themselves.
And really, Judaism is more of a culture than it is actually a religion. That in fact, the culture is more strong, as and you can see that both in the Orthodox as well as the Reformed. The Reformed have almost reformed religion out of, but still remain the culture of Judaism.
Yeah, very much so.
And so these distinctions that you're talking about are almost always cultural. And then we have the issue of meditation. That Western Buddhism, because of the way that it got introduced, Western Buddhism thinks that that meditation is the cat's pajamas. And part of the reason for that is because of the old culture from the West of Catholic meditation, and that the Catholic meditation is a contemplation. And sometimes the pieces of writing, like a poem, a long poem, will be actually labeled a meditation.
Right, yeah.
And so actually, that's not what Buddhism is all about. That what the practice of Buddhism is to go and get into seclusion, to get away from the culture, so that you can then investigate what's really going on in the mind and make some fixes to it.
Mm.
And yet the worst case scenario is the Mahasi that has come to the West. Now, Mahasi Sayadaw, which was a monk who died in 1982, I believe. I was in Burma, by the way, in 1982, right after he died, and they hadn't gotten over it yet. So I missed an opportunity to be with Mahasi Sayadaw. But still, the writings that he has indicates a fuller practice. And yet, due to political circumstances and the power trips of the monks about who's going to take over, they wound up leaving out a great deal of the actual practice, and the actual practice is itself the Eightfold Noble Path. But when you leave pieces out of the Eightfold Noble Path, that's what it then becomes the practice of. For instance, in the Mahasi method, they put a lot of emphasis upon waking up and looking at what you're doing. You look at the dukkha, you see the dukkha, you examine the dukkha, you see that this dukkha is associated with that dukkha, you chase that dukkha down the dukkha rat hole. And you wind up then in this dark space because everything is falling apart, the disillusion, people become afraid, they become miserable, they want to get out of this state that they've gotten themselves into. So that great desire then is that they're actually going to start practicing the fuller Eightfold Noble Path, which is based upon right effort. The key missing point of Western Buddhism is right noble effort. What is that right noble effort? Is to get out of the dukkha, not see it. But in fact, what we want to do is we want to get so sharp that we can see the dukkha at a distance so that we can avoid it, rather than hugging it as a brother and taking his clothes off and examining him completely. You don't need to do that.
I've spent
So,
a bit of time in that trap myself.
So, if we can then see that much of the stuff that's in Western Buddhism has become culturalized, then we can look at one last thing, and that is in the West, Buddhism did not come in actual Buddhist form. It came as culture. The example of that would be C.D. Suzuki and Alan Watts were very early in their introduction. And Alan Watts had a really strong Christian background and a strong Christian influence. And he really didn't understand the real teachings of the Buddha. But in Asia, due to sometimes war and sometimes just going on Tudong, and you just head off in that direction, and you just every day you get some grub and in your bowl, and then keep walking in that direction. And the next thing you know, you're in South Thailand. You started out and they also went in groups, so you could say that it was the Bhikkhu Sangha of monks that spread Buddhism in Asia. They wandered around in small groups, and they had all of the triple gem with them. They had their Buddhas, they had the Dhamma, and amongst themselves they had the Sangha. In the West, got no Buddhas, got some Dhamma, got no Sangha. And so there's a very distorted version of Buddhism in the West that unfortunately winds up being informational, that's not really liberation. And so people wind up being scholars. They write books. I think there's more books now in English language about the Buddha and about the Buddhism than we need. Way more than we need.
And what was the problem with Suzuki's approach?
Actually, for one thing, when he came, it wasn't his approach. It was the way the Westerners approached him. In other words, he was Japanese, he was foreign, he was strange, and so instead of getting what he had to say, they took the original appearance, and then the teachings were put into the context of Westerns, to where in Asia it spread much more slowly and much more clearly, to where Buddhism has kind of taken the West by storm, and it's quite stormy
Yeah.
with all kinds of things mixed up in there,
Yeah.
whirling around. So the whole point then is also the point is that the kind of Buddhism that has come to the West and is in the West is not noble, it's ordinary. The ordinary teachers, and in fact, a lot of Western people who call themselves Dhamma teachers or meditation teachers don't have the real teaching of the Buddha. What they got was from their teacher, and their teacher got it out of a book, or maybe he spent a couple of months or maybe a half a year in Asia, and then come back and add, 5% Dhamma and 95% psychology.
Mhm.
And then they toast it, roast it, and put it on display for a price.
Right.
And so there's a lot of money involved with Western Buddhism. In fact, in some regards, you could say that Christianity is better than Buddhism, because who's going to buy their way into a church? There's nobody standing at the door with a collection plate saying you have to pay to to pray. And yet in the West, that's exactly what they're doing. They have somebody standing at the door charging admission.
Right.
And so you have really expensive retreats and all kinds of things, to where a real retreat is not going to a retreat center that's got 50, 60, 100 people at the retreat. The Buddha didn't teach that at all. And they don't practice that at the Watts. That in fact in Thailand, the whole idea of retreats is something brand new. And it came out of Burma in the 1950s. That before that, there were no such things as people going at a particular time to a retreat and everybody doing it together. That what they teach here in the Watts, when a young monk comes to ordain, they will put him in a place to where he needs some seclusion. In fact, Gil Fosdale really talked about that he had been in Japan learning Japanese meditation, Zen, and then he comes to Thailand and he comes to a Wat and he wants to show off what a good meditator he is. And what the abbot does is put him off in seclusion in the back of the Wat, putting him into the forest. Okay, because the Buddha would teach, go to the forest, go to the foot of a tree, go to an empty hut, go to a pile of straw, and sit down. In fact, it doesn't even say cross-legged. That's a Western mentality of sit down cross-legged. The word in the Pali that's in the dictionary is sit down on a comfortable seat, even a couch or a chair. Now, there's not going to be very many stuffed postered couches and chairs in the woods or in the forest because the animals are going to eat them. But anyway, there's a really major distortion. In the West, they say, oh, we've got to go sit on the floor like the Asians do. Well, you see, in European culture, because of the northern climate, people want to get off the floor. We put our kids in furniture at the age of 2 and 3. Here, the kids will sleep on the floor for most of their life. They'll sit on the floor. They eat on the floor. Big, big banquets can be held any place. In the United States, you can't hold a big banquet without renting out a hotel that's got a whole lot of furniture. In Thailand, your living room floor is good enough for a banquet. You can have 15 or 20 people. We've had that right here at the house. Everybody's sitting around on the floor. and serving food that way. So the poor mentality, the Westerners see and say, oh, that's got to be meditation, rather than the actual practice. And so I make a distinction between meditation and anapanasati, and I am not a meditation teacher. I teach the Dhamma. I teach anapanasati. And the whole point about going to the forest and to the foot of a tree or an empty hut is to get away from civilization. And yet here in the West, we have the meditation retreats, and you bring a whole bunch of people together. And then they say, oh, well, we're going to practice noble silence. Well, no, noble silence is out in the woods. There's nobody to talk to. And so pretty soon, there's nothing to look at. You've seen the forest. You don't spend a lot of time thinking about the forest. You're just sitting there and watching your own mind, making it wholesome. But in the retreats, you have to pretend that those girls over there are not there.
Uh-huh.
You have to pretend that they don't exist. But that doesn't happen. What happens instead often is what they call the Vipassana romance, where both sides of the aisle are thinking about people on the other side of the aisle, rather than going to the woods where there's nobody on the other side of the aisle. And so there's a lot of distortion in Western practice. But your original question was, what about the Thai forest tradition? Well, the Thai forest tradition, take the word tradition out, take the word Thai out, and what have you got left? The forest. And that's where we go to practice.
So I guess I'm having a little trouble reconciling this idea of seclusion with the value of Sangha.
All right. The Buddha says that friendship is all the Dhamma. There's only one Dhamma. Because, in fact, the name of the sutta where this is explained is called the Half Sutta. It's in the Samyutta Nikaya. And that the story is that Ajahn Ananda went to the Buddha after hearing what Sariputta had to say, and came to the Buddha and says, Sariputta says that half the Dhamma is friendship. And the Buddha says, oh no, oh no. Friendship is all Dhamma. That's the only thing there is friendship. The halves come in the sense of becoming friends with yourself, accepting yourself, warts and all, gives you then the ability and the new habit to accept other people. Now, we normally think of friendship as something that we have with others. But really, the friendship should be within. And when we have real friendship within ourselves, then we become whole and unified. But normally, we're at war with ourselves within. I want this, I want that. You should do this. I don't want to do that. These are the rules. You got to fit in. This is the society. This is the way it's done. You can't go and do it that way, and all of this. So these are all internal conflicts that the individual has, including punishing oneself for one's own wrongdoing, depression, anxieties, all of that kind of stuff is the war that we have within ourselves. So naturally, we're going to be in conflict within, is because we learned it that way, because there is already conflict in the community. There's already conflict in the society. So we get into seclusion so that we can come to have a unified mind. And so in the forest tradition, the monks will go to the forest, get their own mind cleaned out, and then they will go back into the village wat with a clean, pure mind so that they can be of some value to the lay people.
I see, yeah.
And so there's both sides of the friendship. is go get your mind cleaned out, and then you can be of value to others.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, that in fact, if I did not have friendship with myself on the inside, then it would be very easy for me to continue with that and not be friends with students. That in fact, this is another issue about the Western mentality, because we've had popes, priests, preachers, teachers, professors, judges on a bench, politicians, etc., like that. Our society has become stratified. And so that stratification is also built right into each child because of the various things that they learn along the way.
Yeah.
And so Western Buddhism winds up being very much like psychotherapy or a doctor-patient relationship. That the doctor is always the doctor and the patient is always the patient. The psychotherapist always the psychotherapist, and the client is always the client. But actually, in the Thai forest tradition, would be is to being able to get the student out of being a student, getting his mind together, and then his relationship with his teacher changes because they become good friends and good buddies, rather than keeping that stratified one up, one down position that's built in to the system that we have in the West. And that's especially true with the money, because the psychotherapist wants to keep getting money from their client. They don't want the client to get well. If they did get their clients well, then where's the new client coming from? Especially if the whole community is now happy, wholesome, and in state of well-being, they don't need a psychologist being a psychologist anymore.
Yeah.
The preacher, if everybody was getting real benefit out of Christianity, there'd be no need for a preacher. That in fact the whole Catholic Church was set up as the priest or an intermediary between you and God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the rabbis and the preachers and the gurus, they want to maintain their position because they're still thinking they're going to get some value out of that position. They can maintain their prominence and their dominance, but within the Sangha, everybody becomes kind of equal. That there is, there's many famous monks. Sure, there's a lot of famous monks, but the way that they live their lives is still friendly with all of the other monks around them. That there is a hierarchy, but the hierarchy is not. It's a hierarchy based upon years of seniority and knowledge rather than position.
Yeah.
And so we're very positionally oriented in the West. And the whole concept of the practice of anapanasati is to stop all of those hierarchies that we have built up in our own mind and see everybody as just ordinary and unique on their own. And so we start off with the equation of less than. I am less than him. And then the opposite of that is I'm greater than he is. I'm better than he is. So you have some people I'm better than they are, and the other people have they are better than I am. And that even equality winds up being in that regard of greater than, less than, equal to, and whatnot like that. But in the context of the Buddhism, we take greater than, equal, and less than out of the equation and substitute it with, let us say, a heart symbol. so that the relationship is a relationship of friendship. So when we talk about politicians, we almost always think of them in two regards. One is that they're very high, they've got position, they've got money, they've got power, they've got an audience and all of that. And they also have a whole lot of moral issues and moral problems. And so half the time we say, I'm better than that politician, and half the time we say that I'm not as good as that politician based upon his status and whatnot like that. And the reality is that they're just ordinary people with ordinary greed, ordinary ill will, and ordinary ignorance. And everybody's like that. And coming out of our ignorance, we recognize that, well, that's our base. We have come out of ignorance. That doesn't make us better than those who are still stuck into it. And so a noble never sees himself as better than other people. That in fact, the idea is to, you come out of your own mud too. You become the lotus. Recognize that the lotus is already there in the mud. And in that regard, we can recognize that, yeah, we've got a lot of mud still left, but that's okay. It's all right to have mud still in your, love yourself, warts and all. Don't hate part of you. The part that's a lotus does not hate the mud. And yet that's what we've got in our society. Thou shalt not kill. We've got these 10 commandments. Thou shalt not do this. Thou shalt not be LGBTQ or something. Thou shalt not blah, 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 blah. And because of that, that creates a duality within our minds. And Anapanasati practice is designed to help us see that duality within and to see that we don't like ourselves the way that we are. Rather than accepting ourselves the way that we are, we want to improve. If you ask somebody, why do you want to meditate? Oh, it's self-improvement. You don't want to improve the self. You want to kind of disregard it. It's, who I am is not important. The importance is can I be in a state of friendship? Can I be in a state of harmony? Can I be in a state of getting in the flow, getting into the rhythm, getting in tune? And if you hear that, getting in the flow, getting in the rhythm, and getting into tune, our life becomes more musical rather than noise. That we all live in the West, and in fact, increasingly so, people live busy, which I equate to noisy lives. And going to the forest is a way of stop being busy and stop being noisy. And yet people go to these retreats and they get really busy and really noisy, and they hate to retreat. They're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They want to go tell their stories about what I got out of meditation and all of that kind of stuff, instead of going to the retreat with the idea, wow, I'm going to go relax. This is really easy. I've got nothing to do for the next 10 days. That in fact, going even closer to what the Buddha would teach, I would recommend people go to the woods and go camping for a week rather than doing a retreat.
Right.
Instead of spending $1,000 for the retreat, go spend hundreds of dollars to get a little bit of camping gear and then go out into the woods.
So can I ask a practical question then?
Absolutely.
So this is something that I've been noticing over the last week or so since our last conversation with my own practice, which is like sometimes what is the skillful move when there is like some awareness present and you see something and you're like, oh yeah, there's a better way that I could be relating to this like feeling or to this thought or whatever. and that awareness is there, but there doesn't seem to be like sufficient energy or like motivation to actually follow through.
Okay. That motivation to follow through is ordinary effort.
Mm-hmm.
The right noble effort is to just relax, just stop what you're doing. You don't have to fix what you're working on. You can just simply stop, take a break. There's a very famous sutta, the Angulimala Sutta, where the conversation is with Angulimala saying, "Stop, monk," because he's trying to catch him, you know.
Yeah.
And the Buddha's answer to that was, "I've already stopped. I have stopped. You stop too. Just stop." Okay? Stop what? Stop the lotus part comparing itself to the mud. Stop fussing at yourself. Stop wanting things. If you find anxiety in the body, you know, because we get tense, uptight, anxious, all of those kind of things are the physical part of it. But we can, on the psychological part that's built right into that, is panic, fear, anxiety, which leads, by the way, to depression. But it's got bodily chemistry to it. And the way to get out of that is by recognizing it and recognize that you're doing it, that you're creating the situation that gives us the feeling of fight or flight. I've got to go do something, or I got to get out of here. There, in fact, really, there's no danger. You don't have to do anything. This is where Anapanasati really has the value: is to take a deep breath and relax.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at though, is that like sometimes like the momentum of the like feeling like you need to like do something is like so strong that it feels like easier, that it like, I don't know, it doesn't feel as simple as like just stopping. Like it feels like it takes like effort to stop.
Well, it does. It takes a lot of effort. That, in fact, the analogy would be that if you're going to stop an automobile, the brakes are going to get hot. But it depends upon how you're doing it. Like there is, you're going too fast, and then you have to apply the brakes almost in an emergency to keep from having a crash. But if you saw that thing, which is not an emergency, in the beginning because you saw it so far away, now you can gently tap or just apply the brake, just easy, and just slow down rather than having to slam on the brakes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that meditation is all about slamming on the brakes. Or even so in the Mahasi method is that you got to take the car apart while it's flying down the road to find the brakes.
Yeah.
And most Mahasi students, they never find the brakes, and this is why they go into that state of despair and anguish, what is referred to in some places in the West of the dark night of the soul, which has nothing to do. The dark night of the soul has nothing to do with trying to find where your brakes are so you can slam on the brakes. Right? Here's the point. The dark night of the soul is when people are at the first level of doubt, looking for someone to fix them, looking for Jesus, looking for a solution. They're frantically trying to find something. And that St. John of the Cross was the one who came up with the term, but our best, more current example is Mother Teresa. That after she died and was canonized, finally they released her memoirs to find out that for probably more than 20 years she was in the dark night of the soul. And what does that mean? That means that she was praying to her plastic Jesus, and the plastic Jesus remained a plastic Jesus. It would not respond to her. God, don't talk to me. In other words, God's not going to fix you, no matter how hard you pray. Jesus is not going to fix you, no matter how hard you want him to fix you. And that's the dark night of the soul, when they recognize he ain't going to fix me. He's not going to do it. Now, it's possible for a monk to get into despair, but if he's got good companions around, they're going to bring him right back out of that. But in the Catholic system and many other religions, nobody can get you out of the dark night of the soul, because they believe the same stuff that you believe. They believe that you need help and they need help, and so the father confessor, he's not going to be able to help somebody out of the dark night of the soul. That his best is going to happen is, if he stays around people who are in such a state, they're going to drag him in there with them.
And so you're saying that the way out is right effort versus looking for a savior.
Right. The right effort is to stop looking for a savior.
Right.
That's the right effort. The right effort is to stop looking for a solution to the problem. There was no problem to begin with. Just stop trying to fix stuff.
Right. Well, yeah, and I guess I guess what I'm still stuck on is that, like, I get the idea of, like, seeing, the thing from a distance and having time to apply the brakes gently, but the reality of where I am seems to be that often, that I am forgetting, and that the thing that, like, brings me back to mindfulness or to awareness is, like, because that I wasn't paying attention. Now there's something here that is necessitating, like, the slamming on of the brakes.
Okay. I have noticed your gesture. And you're doing it with your left hand, and you've done it 3 times in the past minute. And that is this. Have you noticed that you're doing that?
Now that you pointed it out, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, what is that? Is dissatisfaction.
Okay.
That's the racing down the road that we want something. You see people doing this with their hands. They're trying to manufacture something, and basically the hands are just going around in circles. And when we can see that our hands are going around in circles, we recognize that the hands are going around in the circles because the mind is going around in circles wanting something. And because we want something, we have the idea that I can go get something to fix it. I can take a pill, I can go to the priest, I can pray, I can go to the psychologist, I can meditate, always wanting something out of it. And the reality is that nothing is going to fix us. The only thing that's going to fix us is ourself. We have to stop what we're doing, not try to race around trying to find a solution to it, but rather just stop looking.
I guess I don't feel like I know how to do that, or I feel like I think that that's what I'm doing, but it must not be because it's not working.
Okay. Well, again, you're thinking over a long period of time. The question is can right now you see your hand spinning around? Right now, can you see the mind spinning? And stop. Stop right now. Don't worry about the future. Don't worry about is you getting any success. The answer is right now, can we stop wanting something and just relax? Just be okay right now. If we're afraid of something, recognize that fear can be postponed. Right now, I don't have to be afraid. I can relax right now. That this is the value of going to the forest is that all the stuff that happens basically in the village or in the community or in the politics, on the air, in the culture. And if we get away from that, then we can recognize there's nothing to do. I can just sit here and relax. Take a deep breath, and that anxiety will melt away. If we keep taking a deep breath, then we will throw out all of that adrenaline, all that anxiety, all of this, the wanting to make things better, and just stop wanting things to be better and say, hey, they're good enough right now. This is where the idea of the right effort comes into getting out of those unwholesome thoughts and coming back into wholesome thoughts. The wholesome thought is that never mind, I'm okay. Enlightenment, oh yeah, we got to go get it, we got to go get it. Oh, I want to be enlightened, oh, I want to be enlightened, and look what a mess we're in, wanting something. The answer to that in the Zen is already you're already enlightened. Relax, give it a break. Stop wanting something.
So I have another question that I think I might know the answer to, but I want to run it by you just in case. I was I was practicing the other day, and I was sitting on a chair. I was like, there was a lot of like sati. I was really able to stay steadily with the breath and like stay with like thoughts and things that were rising and just let them go and like stay like very calm. And then eventually like discomfort from sitting in one position for too long started to come in. I was trying to practice like you were talking about, just saying like, oh, I'm so glad that I see this and now I can breathe into
Yeah.
it. But
Right.
the rest
And relax, which means take a break, get up, walk around. If your legs hurt,
yeah.
that in fact at Wat Suan Mook they did retreats, but they don't sit for long periods of time. They'll have the students just sitting there for 30 minutes or so with the instruction that if your body starts to hurt, readjust it, stand up,
Yeah.
go walking. But in fact, for a long number of years, they had it the idea that you can go to the back of the hall and do walking meditation. And the back of the hall started to fill up with people who were walking, getting in. So they said, no, go outside.
Yeah.
Have the wide open spaces. Go take a 5-minute break. Go walk, and then come back and sit down. But in fact, it's okay. Many of the Watts in many of the meditation halls in all over Thailand and the West, they have the idea of sitting on furniture. Furniture has gotten quite common now in Thailand. So sit down on furniture. You don't have to sit on the floor because you're not used to sitting on the floor. But we go along to get along, and we see all the Thai people sitting on the floor. So we say, oh, that must be the path to meditation. You got to sit still on the hard floor.
Okay. So might a good solution to that be like notice it and like try to just relax the body and relax the mind, but if it persists, then change position or get up and walk.
Sure. Yeah, get up and walk around. Yeah. The whole point is that your mind is not going to be comfortable if your body is not comfortable.
Yeah.
And yet, a lot of the Mahasi method in sitting for long periods of time is to try to overcome the discomfort
Yeah.
rather than giving into it so that you can be comfortable. This is, I forget which sutta number it is. I think it's 63 or 65, something like that, in the Majjhima Nikaya, where someone gets shot with an arrow. And when his friends see that, they go and get a medical doctor, and the doctor comes rushing up to him, and he says, before you take the arrow out, I want to know who shot me. I want to know all about this arrow. I want to know where he was standing and what kind of bow he used. I want to know all about this guy who shot me with an arrow. And you'll never get to the end of how many questions that you have, that the guy will die from that arrow. The real thing to do is to take the arrow out. Just stop and just pull it out. Go back out of those unwholesome thoughts, because every unwholesome thought is like an arrow. We stab ourselves with it. And when we see that we're hurting ourselves by wanting something, wanting enlightenment, wanting a raise, wanting a girlfriend, when we start to see that wanting things is dukkha, wanting things that you don't have. And so what we begin to do is to stop all of that. And one way to do it is to substitute something. An example would be only want things that are easily available to you. Stop wanting things that are hard to get and start wanting things that are easily available. Because then you're practicing being a winner, because everything you want, you can get it.
Yeah.
But the loser is the guy who wants something that he can't get. Let us say running for public office. We want that office. We want that office. If you actually win that office, that's actually now more things to want.
Yeah.
Why did that we weren't satisfied that we got the office. Now we can say, okay, now I can practice my greed. Now we can find a table to do stuff under the table.
Yeah. And even in like very simple ways, like it's so easy to fall into this trap of like allowing what was the solution a moment ago to become the problem. Like in the example that I gave, where it was like I was breathing and relaxing, and that was helping until it wasn't. But I was like attached to that being the right thing, so I just kept trying to force that instead of
Exactly. Wherein what we really need to do was to make a change.
Yeah.
Because Buddhadasa was very big on that word change. Whatever you're doing right now, change it. Stop doing what we're doing. Just stop doing it.
Yeah.
And the easy way to do that is by start doing something that's easy to do. One of the stories that I would tell is, let us say that somebody here on this island wanted a whiskey or some kind of special, like maybe DOM or Johnny Walker Black or something like that. Oh, I want that whiskey. So now I get up and I go to the store 10 kilometers from here, and none of the stores have that kind of whiskey. So I says, oh no, now I got to go to Bangkok. And I go to Bangkok and I go looking at every liquor store and every bar. Nobody's got it. So now I got to go get on an airplane to go to maybe Kentucky, so that I can get what I want. And when we get there and look how much effort we put into it, was it all that satisfying? No. Okay, so this is the whole point, is to stop wanting that which we don't have and be satisfied with what we do have, because what we do have is easy enough to get. And if you want something that you don't have, want something that's easy to get,
Yeah.
rather than wanting something special.
I'm a little hung up on this idea of like changing what you want. Like sometimes it doesn't feel that simple. Like it doesn't feel like
Well, then, but change that feeling then, and begin to have the feeling that everything is easy.
Yeah.
I can want just what's easy to get.
Yeah.
Because wanting something is dukkha. Seeing that it's hard to get and I want it anyway. I want enlightenment. Oh, I want to have my mind cleaned out. Well, wanting to have the mind cleaned out is dukkha. Just saying, hey, my mind's okay right now. It's already all right. This is where we begin to learn to love the mud. You see the lotus, you want the lotus, but the mud's okay. Be satisfied with your mud.
Definitely given me a lot to play with here.
And so we can say, all right, everything is okay. This is all right. This is good enough. We don't need anything. And so the second level of doubt, we've talked about the first level of doubt that most people live their whole lives in, is wanting help from the outside.
Yeah.
So the second level of doubt is, am I up to the task? Can I do it?
Pretty well too.
Uh-huh. And the answer to that is, well, it's so simple. All I need to do is do it right now, rather than saying I've got to do it permanently. I have to kill my enemy rather than making friends.
Yeah.
And what we need to do, instead of stopping by killing the enemy, what we can do is stop seeing him as an enemy right now.
Yeah.
Let him be an enemy tomorrow, but right now, he's okay.
Interesting.
And so giving one the position of going into the forest means that we give them the opportunity to see that there's no place to go and there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do and no place to go, and what we've got right now is good enough for right now. And then we can see that, wait a minute, I can do this. I can do this. This is in the Anapanasati Sutta of recognizing that if we keep practicing right noble effort of coming out right now about our problem, then we begin to get the attitude, I can come out of my problems. I can do this. And that's when the second level, if we can practice satisfaction and get some satisfaction, fairly soon we'll begin to see that I'm successful at being satisfied. And that success then puts us into I can do this mentality. I can do this. I can find what I'm looking for. If I stop feeling bad because I can't find what I'm looking for and just start looking, then I can find whatever it is. Because I need to stop looking for something and just simply start looking. Just looking at what's real, looking at how things are. And so as we continue to do this, that second level of doubt is removed. And then when we're practicing that way, we begin to see that the Eightfold Noble Path, this teaching of the Buddha, actually is successful. It works. And we begin to have the attitude then of, oh, wow, this is the way to live my life. This is the path. This is the method every moment of just relaxing. Because when we start doing it, we're not very good at it. We don't trust it. So as we begin to gain the skills in it, we begin to trust that, oh, I can do this. And then the third level of doubt is, hot dog, this is the path. I've got it. This, and is referred to in the sutras as knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path. Because almost all the religious activities we've been practicing are not the path, because we're not getting any value out of it. And so it's always, right now, can I stop what I'm doing and maybe do something new, like changing the unwholesome to wholesome. An example of that would be, we had an argument with Aunt Susie, and now we want to go back because we think she kind of won that argument, and so we want a rematch. We want a redo. We're going to get our way finally. But a better way of thinking is that, oh, I should appreciate Aunt Susie. She's pretty good at being an arguer. I can appreciate her. I can be friends with her and see in that we're changing our attitude from I'm a loser because she bested me in that argument into the argument's not important. I can stop trying to fix something that's not broken. You're already okay. That argument's in the past. The only thing that's left of that argument is your own memory of it because you didn't like it. So throw that argument out of the mind and appreciate, oh, I'm so happy that Aunt Susie is very sharp. I should listen to her. And so we've changed that from an unwholesome thought to a wholesome thought. Or another thing to say, Aunt Susie, get out of here. I'm having too much fun. You're not really physically here. Why are you here in my mind? And so that would be the more direct stopping method or you can change it to something more wholesome. And one of the things that we can actually pay attention to is the fact of anxiety and fear is something that we do in the mind. That the reality is that there's no sharks, there's no crocodiles, there's no snakes, there's no government officials, there's no Russian mafia. There's no problems right now. So why am I thinking about all the problems? I can just sit here and relax. No place to go and nothing to do. And so we become kind of unified in that state of, you're already okay. You're the winner here. You're the boss of your life. You've got the power to do nothing. Because you've already arrived. The other example that I use is the example of a pilgrim. You know what a pilgrim is? Somebody who's going someplace. He's on a pilgrimage. And when he actually gets, this happened a lot. About 1000 AD. The Crusades, 1200 AD, 1300 AD, those times. And they had a lot of pilgrimages. That's one of the Templars were actually guards to make sure that all the pilgrims who wanted to go from Europe over to the Holy Land, so the pilgrims went there. But there's a lot of different holy sites. And so they get to one holy site. How long do they stay at that holy site? Not long. Then they'll get up and go to another holy site. So they spend almost all their time being a pilgrim and very, very little time actually being in the holy site. And so that same thing is what's happening with our meditation practices, is we're on their way to something. Rather than recognizing you're already in a holy place. This is good enough. Just relax and enjoy the fact that you've already arrived. Here you are. And this is good enough. You're already in the holy place. No place to go, nothing to do. This is good enough. In fact, it's holy. If it's whole. But we make places unholy. They were already sacred. They were already holy. But now we're the ones who come and divide it up. Oh, this is a holy site, but Jerusalem is even more holy. Let's go to Jerusalem. And so we discount the fact that we're already in a holy place. This was good enough. And so we stay on a pilgrimage. And the Buddha says, stop. You're already in that holy place. This is good enough. Then we say, oh, but I've got to be perfect. Oh, I've got to have perfect sila. And the answer to that is, stop judging it. You're already okay. Love yourself warts and all. This is good enough. Yeah, my lotus still is in the mud, but it belongs in the mud. You take the lotus out of the mud, what you got? A dead lotus. So let yourself be okay the way that you are. That's the change that needs to be made. Because when the mind is noble and everything is okay the way that it is, if you're already satisfied, if you don't want anything, you're unlikely to kill somebody to get it. If you don't want anything, you're unlikely to go rob. If you're unlikely to go lie your way into getting it. And so the real precepts or the real sila is being satisfied. Because when you're satisfied, you're not hurting anybody. Wanting something, now you're in danger of hurting yourself and others. Yeah, just you're okay. This is what needs to be practiced because we're in such a habit of wanting things. And so those desires come up. Look at my hand when I do that. The, the desires come up. And so we can say, wait a minute, look at all of that desire. Maybe I can just let the hand rest. Let the mind rest. It's good enough right now. Don't need anything. No place to go. Nothing to do. Nothing to fear. Nothing to get comfortable about. We're already comfortable. This is good enough. And that's when that deep satisfaction starts to grow. And that's what we need to practice is the satisfaction. Then, in fact, the actual technical definition in English of the word dukkha is not suffering, it's dissatisfaction. And so, if we can practice being satisfied,
Seems like
then
such
we're
an
not in dukkha. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it seems like such an important point that you made about like not being concerned about like be like it being lasting forever or whatever. But it's just like no, we're practicing that right now.
Right now. Yeah. Don't worry about tomorrow, being okay tomorrow. Be okay right now. If you practice being okay right now, if you practice being satisfied right now, then you can use that skill tomorrow. And pretty soon you'll get the attitude, hey, I can do this. Because there's really nothing to it, is I can stop what I'm doing and start being satisfied with what I'm doing. Because I'm not doing much. And so I'm doing very little or nothing at all, and I can become satisfied with that, then that satisfaction will grow. The less you do, the more satisfied you'll become. And the more we do is because the more we want. The more we do, the more we want, the more we want, the more we do. And so that's that vicious cycle. And all we have to do is take a deep breath and relax with the thought, this is good enough. Everything's okay. Everything is all right. No place to go, nothing to do, and everything is easy. And then a thought will come, never mind, start again, come back, there's no place to go, nothing to do, everything is easy. We can relax. Everything we're talking about is right there in the sutras. They're just so badly translated that people want the Dhamma. They want to know what the Buddha said. That's why people would translate, is because they wanted something. So naturally, the translations themselves are going to be full of the desire of the translator.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is actually the teaching of the Buddha is so easy. Just see the discomfort and the dissatisfactions we have right now and stop and just relax. Everything's okay. Become satisfied. See your dissatisfactions and stop them and become satisfied. This is good enough. I'm comfortable. Nothing to fear here. No place to go. Nothing to do. Everything's easy. I can do this. This is the right way to practice. This is knowledge and vision of the Dhamma. no anxiety. Boy, this is good. Andrew, go practice like this. This is the way to practice. I didn't hear you.
I said thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, we'll see you later.
Talk to you later.